Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you. Okay, so Justin literally looked at me and said, "You better open this up with something interesting." To which case, Pietze goes, I know, The Mandalorian.
It's so good.
It is really good.
You don't know what you're missing. Also,
She goes, "It is way more interesting than you think."
yeah, because the way you looked at me was like, that is the stupidest thing I have ever heard.
I've been telling Abby for like the last two
I'm
seasons.
not against The Mandalorian.
I'm like, you need to watch
guys.
it. You're like, I don't want to watch it.
No,
I'm like, no, it's really good, and I hate Star Wars.
You do really?
I'm not a fan of Star Wars.
Oh my gosh, that's
I haven't
interesting.
liked it really.
Well, I find
I'm
that
like,
fascinating.
I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. The nerd in me is not that nerdy about it.
Yeah, but I like it because it's kind of like you go against the grain in your nerdiness.
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, everyone loves Star Wars. I don't like
I'm
it.
a cool nerd.
I'm a rebel nerd.
I'm a rebel nerd.
Yeah.
I'm a rebel
I like
nerd.
it.
hmm But I love Gina
But come on,
Carano.
Baby Yoda. Have you seen
I
Baby
think Baby
boss.
Yoda is adorable.
Yeah, Baby Yoda.
Yeah. Okay, well,
I want
there's
a
your
Baby Yoda.
interesting opening for you,
Yeah.
Justin.
If you don't have a Baby Yoda, you need to get yourself one.
I
need
want
a
one.
baby
Buy one
Yoda.
I
on the
want
black
to
market.
snuggle him.
Oh,
You're so cute.
I want to use him for his powers.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible. You sound like the dark side.
You do sound like the dark side. Speaking of using people's powers,
The Force is with this one.
Speaking of the Force.
we are doing a conversation. This is part 2 of a conversation we started with my best friend Pietze. Welcome.
Woo woo.
Pietze is my best friend in the whole entire world.
I am your best friend in the entire world.
Justin,
She
I'm
is
number
your
one.
second best friend.
I am number one.
I mean, well, like, let's designate the person I've known longer is Pietze.
The person you don't sleep with.
The person I don't have sex, the person I have sex with is
Justin.
So you both have one up on the other.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sure.
Depends if you think I like history or orgasms more.
Well, it's horrible. Who's going to choose history?
Yeah. Nobody.
Maybe the nerd in history class from 7th grade who had no friends and they found their identity in history? Seriously, that's what I get. I get history. He gets orgasms.
I guarantee we're going to have some history nerd ready and be like, that was offensive.
That was incredibly offensive. I need you to take ownership for it.
I mean, I don't know. I love Pietze a lot.
Okay.
I'm great with that.
You're her number one girlfriend.
There we go.
Okay.
We've distinguished. You're my number one girl. You're my number one guy.
Hey, we're going to hear about Pietze's story today. We're going to dive right into this.
We're going to take a deep dive.
In
into
case
that
you don't
story.
know, our first episode was about the prophetic and trying to understand what that even means. The prophetic in the religion we grew up in is a lot of cultures have ways to foretell the future, what's coming, what's happening, dreams or visions or reading hands or, like
Palm reading. Little palm reading. You said reading
palm
hands.
reading is the
That's
same
called-
as reading hands.
They don't call it reading hands.
Yeah.
It's called palm reading.
Some people are like, let me read the lines on your hands.
Yeah, palm reading.
Okay. But then I was thinking about like all those movies, where they toss like the fish bones and they go into a certain direction so they know what's happening. There's also that kind. There's a lot of different cultures that have a lot of different ways of trying to discern the future because we all want to know the future. We all want to know if we're going to be good or not, if we're going to be safe or not, if what is happening. There's like and everybody thinks that they know the future, that they can get a leg up on what's going on around them.
Yeah.
And that may or may not be true. I've seen a lot of people hate their lives after feeling like they know what is coming. Like, would you want to know how you're going to die? Or what if you knew
No.
one day I'm going to choke on a pea and then you refuse to eat peas your whole life,
Yeah,
but you
and
still...
because I already refuse to eat peas, but it would be like, something good like candy.
Oh,
You're
yeah,
gonna
what if
die
they're
on
like-
a candy bar.
And then you'd have to deprive your whole life never knowing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so in the culture we grew up in, we grew up with a Christian faith, and there is a prophetic culture, which is where people can say, that's a great language, that they feel like they hear God on your behalf or for you, or you can feel like you hear God for yourself, or you can have dreams or visions. There's a lot of different ways that people connect to God's voice. We are not talking about that today. And we did the foundation for this whole episode in the first part of this
last week's
conversation. So we're going to jump in. I just wanted to give them kind of a catch up.
What we shared, Abby and I shared some of our stories in the last one. And this one, Pietze's going to share kind of her heart journey with God and hearing the prophetic and how that's affected her. And I think it's such a powerful story. I love how Pietze articulates her journey of life and her expression and experience with God as a friend. And so, I want to get into that.
Yeah. I think what was interesting is like you guys shared a lot about how, hearing prophetic words, receiving prophetic words, if you will, and your stories actually caused a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And really took you off a path, a path into chaos, and I actually have my fair share of those as well. And I think,
anyone who's been around the block does.
Yep. Everyone does, as well as you guys have a lot of stories where you've gotten, and you shared about that.
Yeah.
Then you got prophetic words and they turned out to be, right. And
really
it was really hopeful and really helpful in a lot of ways, but I would say probably one of the biggest interesting ways that the prophetic has come into my life is through one of the most painful journeys of my life. And I was thinking about it and I'm like, I really think that I had the opportunity to hear God's voice this way because I wasn't taking pain off the table through the prophetic. And we talked a little bit about this, how, a lot of times we think if we get a prophetic word and we follow it correctly, that we won't experience pain.
Right.
And I think by this point in my life, I had experienced so much pain that I'm like, pain's inevitable. It's just part of life. So when I got these words, it wasn't hey, this is an invitation out of pain. It was an invitation to be fathered and loved through the pain.
I love that.
And that's so great. It kind of comes back all the way. And I actually do share this story on the podcast, like a few,
it's episode 5 or 6.
Yeah. Where I talk kind of about this whole journey and kind of weave the whole prophetic into it. But an interesting thing is just, before my husband and I decided to have kids, I remember I was sitting down and spending time with God, and just as clear as day, I felt like God said to me, you're going to have a daughter. Your firstborn is going to be a daughter, and her life is going to challenge your life. And I thought I was like a feisty kid.
Yeah.
So, and my mom would always, I'm going to say she cursed me. She would always curse me by saying, I hope you have a daughter just like you. When she was mad at me, right? Like to throw it in my face. I'm like, yeah, I hope I have a daughter just like me too, because I'll know how to parent her. Unlike you. That's what I was saying in my head. I didn't say that to her. Otherwise I would have been grounded until now.
Yeah.
But I remember I just heard that clear as day and I wrote it down. And we talked a lot about shelving words, how you shelf words. One of the ways that I shelf them is I write them down in a journal. I don't have them up. I don't think about them all the time. Occasionally I go back, I pray about them often. Yeah. I go back and read them. And it's interesting because a lot of times when I go back and read, I'm like, oh, that actually came to pass, but I want to a lot of times too, because in our memory, we don't remember, memory is so weird that it can start to morph into something that it never was.
Yes.
Over time, that I think that so looking back, I think God said something or I heard something completely different than what it was.
Right. So writing things down is really valuable to you.
Really helpful because it kind of keeps me back on, okay, no, this is what it was. And I have to decide if that being what it was is what was right or not.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I write it down and I just kind of forget about it. I'm like, okay, well, we'll see. We'll see if this is true or not. We'll see what happens. And then a few years later, we still hadn't had kids at this point, but a few years later, I got a word about there being this pearl of great price in my life. And that's basically a Bible story about the story of God. But they said it's not about the story of God. You're going to have something in your life that is so precious that you will give everything for, and it will cost you.
Let's explain the story really quick. So the story in the Bible is this man goes out, finds this pearl of great price in this field, sells everything he owns to be able to buy the field so that he can have the pearl of great price.
Yep. Totally.
That's what the story is.
Exactly. And so somebody said, like, you're going to have a pearl of great price in your life where you'll basically give up everything to have this. And they said to me specifically, you need to know that this thing will cost you everything, but you will gladly lay your life down for it. And I had no idea what it was about. Literally, when they gave me that word, I wrote it down and I was like, I have no idea what that was. And what I see people do is a lot of times they'll write something down and then they try to figure out what it is in their life immediately, rather than saying,
absolutely. Right. They're like, is this it? Is this it? Is this it?
Yeah. Like, I could have easily taken that and gone like, oh, it's about this thing, or it's about this guy, or it's about, whatever it would be. Which I was married by that point, so it wouldn't have been about another guy. Sorry, babe, if you're listening. But, it was just one of those interesting things, but it made no sense to me. So I wrote it down and forgot about it. Literally wrote it down and forgot about it. Well, then we end up getting pregnant, which it was hard to get pregnant. So already it was really challenging. Then I have like the worst pregnancy possible. And I remember saying out loud so much like, man, this baby, I'm like this is going to make me sound like a horrible mom, but this is the kind of mom I am. I remember saying often like, I am sacrificing everything and giving up my life for someone I don't even know.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a horrible mom.
Like, I don't even know this. Like, is this even worth it?
It's costing me so much.
That's a great, honest thought.
It's costing me so much, and I don't know if this is worth it. Like, obviously, I would never get rid of my baby. I was in at that point. I'd made the decision, but I remember thinking, like, I am laying my life down for someone that I don't even know.
Yeah.
Let's hope it's worth it. Turned out to be totally worth it. But when my daughter was born, she came out seemingly normal. Like, she met all of her tests and all that kind of thing. But shortly after she was born, definitely we started to realize that some things were not normal. And part of it was that she had extreme colic. Not colic, she had extreme colic. Like, this girl never stopped screaming, and she had tons of stomach issues, couldn't keep milk down. And basically it was just, we got no sleep. You could tell something is wrong with this baby. We don't know what. And then over time, basically there came a point where she digressed so much in her development that we knew that something was really wrong, and come to find out that she was autistic. And so, that journey for me was incredibly painful. But I remember after I found out that she was autistic, thinking all the way back to that word when God was like, hey, you're going to have a firstborn. She's going to be a daughter, and her life will challenge your life. And I remember after I found out that she was autistic, I spent like 3 days in bed, like basically because it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was in complete crisis.
Oh, absolutely.
And, because all the questions are running through your head, like, what is our future going to look like? Is this like, is she going to be able to talk? Is she going to be able to walk? Is she going to be able to function? Are we going to take care of her for the rest of our life? Like, what is now every hope and dream that I had for our life is
on the table.
Is on the table. I have no idea what it's going to look like. And life is so different than I ever thought it was going to be, raising kids. But I remember thinking back to that word, and I began to cry. And I remember it wasn't because I thought God's a cruel jerk and like, why didn't you stop this? And I had to let me say that
for people to process that way. Yeah.
And let me say, like, side note, I've had to process through some of those things.
Right.
I've had to let myself wrestle that. I've had to let myself ask. I typically tell people, don't ask the why questions because they're not going to get you somewhere good. No. Ask the what questions, like not why did this happen, but what are you doing through it? But there have been dark moments where I had to let myself wrestle through whys.
Oh, yeah.
And that's okay. But I remember in that moment that it wasn't a question, because pain was already off the table. And I knew that pain is inevitable. It's a part of the journey. And not that God, there's so many theological things we could go. Does God cause pain? Does he allow, all the things? It's just, pain's a part of life.
Yeah.
We live in a broken world. You will experience pain. That's it. It is what it is. But because pain was off the table, thinking back to that word, I felt so much love and tenderness from God, because I'm like, you knew, and you were preparing. You saw me back then, and you were preparing me. And I remember before I got pregnant telling God, like, whoever you choose, there just came this moment of surrender where I was like, if I do, because we struggled to get pregnant, and I was like, if we do get pregnant, whoever you give us, I will commit to loving them all. I don't know how, and I don't even know how to commit that to you, but I will go on the journey of loving them all, no matter what that looks like.
Yeah.
And so when I remembered that word, like, God, you told me that I would have a girl, and you told me that her life would challenge mine. I felt the sudden strength of a father coming behind me saying, I've always prepared you for this. Like, I've prepared you to walk this journey. And I'm in this. I have not forgotten you. I have not abandoned you here. And specifically going back to the pearl of great price word, because I forgot to tie this in, but when I was still pregnant with her and it was really hard, my husband was in a touring band at the time, and I'd gone to one of his concerts, and I'm sitting back in this big arena, of course, surrounded by these stupid teenage boys. I'm like so big and pregnant and like grouchy and sick and horrible. And they're like doing stupid fart noises and I'm like, why am I here? But my brother-in-law started sharing the story of the pearl of great price. And in a second, I felt God again. And he said, remember that word about the pearl of great price. And he said, she's your pearl. Like, she's your pearl of great price. Like, she's worth everything, and you'll lay your life down for her. And I just began to weep, and I shared with my husband that night, and he's like, we have to name her Pearl. Yeah. Like, that has to be her name. She is the pearl of great price. But then when I found out that she was autistic,
that had a whole new meaning.
It had a whole new meaning, but it didn't feel like a cruel joke. It felt like, God, you're the God. It's just like, there's this Bible story where God sees this woman who's been massively afflicted. And the first thing he says to her is, I'm the God who sees. I'm the God who sees. And just that statement, like, I'm the God who sees. Like, I see your affliction, and I have not abandoned you in it. I've actually been with you the whole time, and I won't abandon you in it. I'm going to be with you in it. Meant more to me than I could ever even convey. And I feel like what those words began to do is they were lighthouses in storms.
Come on.
Where it was like, I'm in a storm and I'm being tossed about, and I don't know what is up and what's down and where to go. But all of a sudden I remember you spoke to me, and there's a lighthouse of hope. It doesn't mean I'm out of the storm. Yep. It doesn't mean the storm is gone, but it's saying, no, it's like little beacons of hope along the way saying, I'm in the story. I'm in the storm. I'm here with you, and I'm going to help you through.
Come on.
You know, because that's what a lighthouse is. I'm going to help you find refuge. I'm going to help you through this.
Get to land.
You know? And so I look at it, you know, had I not had the preparation of pain, of taking pain off the table, had I felt like a victim to God, I could have used these as ammunition and evidence for why it's all a cruel joke and why God is really awful. But because I had reconciled this foundation with God of saying, hey, pain's off the table. I know that I'm going to experience it, but I know that you, and this was a part of my deconstructing my own faith, where I got all the way through my performance. I had to deconstruct my performance and get all the way to the fact of, if I'm a horrible loser who can't do anything in the kingdom of God, your heart disposition will not change towards me.
Come on.
I could run out today and go murder somebody, and you still will feel the same way you do as if I'm a loving mom, like serving my kids at home. Like you don't, and that had already been established because of my deconstructing my faith, that when I received those words, it was a totally different meaning to me because there was no performance. Right. There was no like transactional relationship, right? Like there was no transaction. It was just love and relationship and friendship and care and fathering. And the belief of knowing that, hey, you're a really good dad. Yeah. You're a good dad. That if you're saying this to me, that like it's because your heart is good, because you want me to know that you see me in the journey.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that. It's so beautiful the way that I'm listening to you, and I'm like, it really does show a lot of your heart of trust and acceptance. And I think a lot of times people can use the prophetic to try to avoid acceptance. Like they live in denial because of the prophetic instead of being able to be like, yeah, no, this is hard and he's with me in it. Yeah. I think a lot of people, and there's become this like kind of hip new thing where there's prophetic people who only prophesy positive things every single day. Like every day it's like, today, the breakthrough you've been waiting for the last 7 years is going to happen. And then tomorrow is like, today, the favor you've been waiting on is going to be released. And then today, and there can be so many positive things that you keep feeling like the like hope up, hope down, hope up, hope down.
Yeah,
hope
where's
up,
the good
down.
prophetic words where they're like, today life is going to take a shit on you and you're going to survive.
But it's like one of those things that if you live in the like fear of what's going to happen, you can actually bring more negativity to you.
Yeah. Oh,
and
totally.
So your posture of trust, of like, I know that God is good and he's with me.
Yeah.
Is the posture that enabled those prophetic words to fuel you instead of deteriorate.
And, you know, I think had I not, I'm sure that God would have intervened and I would have grown no matter what the journey looked like. But I'm so thankful that I had that, because truly they have been bedrocks and so helpful on the journey. Like I look at that and I'm like, all those prophetic words don't feel cruel. They actually feel incredibly helpful and they're very grounding for me. So when I start to spiral in fear, when I start to abandon my heart and go into fear or go into distrust, I think back on those words and they ground me back into the journey, back into love, back into hope, back into being secure, no matter what the story looks like.
Yeah.
You know?
I really love that. Okay, Pietze, one of the things that you're really good at is not using the prophetic to be an escape for your life right now. Because I see that happen a lot of times. Like people are really struggling in their life. And so they want a prophetic word that gets them out of being present into a different future where they feel better because everything's different.
And people do that often. They live in their imagined scenarios. They they don't want to live here today. Anything they can do, getting into tomorrow and fantasizing about tomorrow. And that's, as a side note, that's what the prophetic can become, is this fantasy land.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, oh yeah, when everything works out and I'm a millionaire because God's talking to me about this one day when I have this perfect life.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I think back to like one thing my dad, because I grew up in a prophetic environment, in a highly prophetic environment.
Yeah.
But one thing that my dad always told us that I felt was really helpful is he's like, what happens from God to your head and then out of your mouth to the person's ears, a lot can get jumbled in there.
It's like the game of telephone.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot can get jumbled in there. And so
because you're interpreting what you think it means and saying what your
the person
thoughts are,
who's hearing
you can
it
add to it.
Exactly. And so even just sometimes it comes down to the specifics of the word could have been wrong, but the main theme was right in the end, you know? And so I feel like that helped me to temper it. But I've recognized that there's, you know, and we talked about shelving words in the last podcast a lot, but I really do picture this, like my life is like a room and I have I have several things in the room, but two of the main things in the room are a shelf and a mystery box, you know? And so the shelf is like, I'm looking at Justin's shelf with all of his amazing action figures right here. Let's say that those are all prophetic words. You know, like I get a new one and I put it on the shelf and I look at it from time to time. Occasionally, one of those prophetic words didn't come to pass, or it wasn't right, or it in the end still doesn't make sense. And instead of throwing it away, I put it in the mystery box. And I say, maybe one day this will make sense. And maybe that will be maybe that'll be in heaven when I'm united with God. And maybe it will never will. Maybe it'll be like, oh yeah, that was bad pizza that person had. That was totally not, like, gotta laugh and you'd be like, oh yeah, you put so much into it. It was totally bad pizza, you know? But a lot of times people have a problem. We love black and white.
Yes.
We love knowing.
Absolutely.
We love knowing this is going to happen. This isn't going to happen. This is right. This
then
is
I can
wrong.
prepare for it. And and it can alleviate my fear because we're fear-driven beings.
Yeah. And our culture in some ways is going more that way. That's right. That's wrong. This is good. This is bad. And the walk, you know, I feel like us in this room, so much of what we've come to in our walks with God is saying, it's in the middle. It's in the tension of the two. There isn't a right or a wrong.
Right.
It's in the balance. It's in the mystery. And I don't have to know everything in order to feel safe.
Right.
Because I don't have to
this clarity to be able to be at peace inside of myself.
Yeah. And I don't have to abandon my heart in the process. So a lot of times when I get that prophetic word and I put it on the shelf, what it actually does is, like I said, I'll look at it from time to time. I'll come back to it. I'll even pray into, like, I'll say, okay, God, if this is you, just make it come to pass. But I still leave it on the shelf. I don't hold it tight, but then what it allows me to do is that eventually sometimes I'll go back to those prophetic words and realize, oh my gosh, I had totally forgotten about this, but we're right in the middle of this work.
Yeah.
And then what it does is it helps me to re-engage in the life right in front of me. Right? So a lot of times with prophetic words, we'll get a prophetic word and we start future tripping.
Yes.
We start living into the future. We start trying to avoid pain.
When this happens, I'll be good. Or when this happens, I need to avoid this. Or
yeah. And a lot of times what I see people do is, they get a prophetic word about the future. They go into fear about the future, and inevitably they end up causing the very thing that they don't want to have happen, because it's all fueled by fear. Fear is always a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
So they get a prophetic word about this guy that they're going to, which you shouldn't give words about being married. Like, we covered that, but then they start getting freaked out about it and start going nuts. And inevitably they drive that friendship away. You just see it. But really, when I shelve it and I allow it to stay on the shelf and I come back to it from time to time, then when I see it and it makes sense, it actually helps me to live the life right in front of me. I'm actually not future tripping anymore. And if it doesn't make sense, I don't have to reason it. I put it in the mystery box.
I want to say this. It's interesting because when we have put something on the shelf that feels like it could be real, we don't know what it looks like and stuff. And when we look at in retrospect, the realities that it was real and that there was a conversation God was having with us around it. There's something about history all of a sudden that's been established. So when I look back at the times where God spoke maybe about our marriage, Abby and I's marriage and stuff like that, and put it on that shelf and then revisit it, I get to sit there and be like, oh, he's been a good dad. He was there in that. And he came through in these ways. And instead of all the stuff, the cases we build against a relationship with God, I've now built a case for how he's a good, involved father inside of it.
I was thinking about something that really changed how I viewed the prophetic and God was this teaching by Danny Silk. And he just talked about the difference between expectations and expectancy. And it changed the game for me, because it was like, when I have specific expectations, like maybe God says, this is going to be the year that you start to walk in your destiny.
Yeah.
My brain's automatically going to be like, maybe I'm going to write a book this year, or maybe I'm going to start speaking this year, or maybe I'm going to, like I create all of these ideas. And so that becomes expectations. So then I can get to the end of the year and be like, well, none of that happened.
Yeah.
But expectancy is, I believe good things are happening and are propelling me towards the future. And I don't know what those actually are, but I'm excited for what they are and where they lead me. And so the idea is like, I believe that God's writing a good story, and I don't know what it'll look like. So when we first started getting prophetic words about getting a house soon, my expectations were like, oh, this year we're going to get a house. Like, that's soon,
right?
To me.
Totally. 6 years ago.
6 years ago. So now what it began to change into was this surrendered place of like, I believe that God's good and one day we'll have a house.
Yep.
And what we typically do is we either have all of our expectation on what we think it should look like, or we have disappointment and hopelessness.
Yep.
And there's this surrender. I always say it's not that you give up your desire for what you want.
Yeah, you don't give up the thing itself.
No, but you give up your attachment that you can only be happy when that happens. You can only be fulfilled when that happens. You can only be who you're made to be when that happens.
The desperate need to make it happen.
Yes.
Yep. You don't have to give up the thing itself, but the desperate need to make it happen.
Yeah, I thought about like when I was younger wanting to get married, and I remember getting a prophetic word that like I would never step into my full calling until I got married. Well,
sure.
What is that supposed to do? Now it just means I can't be my full self until I get married. Like I'm just on hold until then.
You're victim to having to get married in order to live out the purpose of God over your life.
Yes. So that's a horror. And so instead of being like, oh, there's going to be good gifts that happen when I get married, but also there's a lot of good gifts that happen currently right now.
Yep, totally.
I was thinking about the mystery box that you're talking about, and I use
The old mystery box.
The old mystery box.
Sounds so dirty when you say it.
No, I thought it sounded like an old man telling a story.
Oh, I thought he was like talking about vaginas. The good old mystery box.
The old mystery box.
That's all kinds of prizes.
That's kind of how it is.
What surprises in there? Okay, so I was thinking about our journeys when you were sharing your story and like how much I've prayed into my story with kids and how much I've asked God about my story with kids. And I could listen to your story and literally be like, oh, God clearly had a plan for your children and who they were going to be. And what about me? Like, what's the plan for? And I think, and it's very easy to do. I wasn't feeling that when you were talking. I was just thinking about how that is something that I've worked with a lot of clients who would feel that way. Well, great. He gave you a word about kids and you know where it's happening, but he didn't give me anything. So does that mean it's not his will to give me kids?
Right.
Does it mean he didn't have a plan for if I would have kids or not? And, I think going back to what you said, we like to be black and white. We like to understand everything. And for me, even when I was listening to you, the thought of like, it's so interesting. God hasn't like given me any of those words. The immediate thought I went to is I just put it in the mystery box. Was it God's will that I not have kids? Or was it like, it was his will, but then I got sick. Yeah. And that like there's so many layers to, and then you have all the questions of when will he like trump humanity and when will he allow humanity? And I
you start to go into a logical spiral where you're trying to figure it all out, and all it does is cause more pain, confusion, and disillusionment. You know? And it's not that you don't have to ask those questions sometimes and contend those questions, but a lot of time we're going on that journey out of fear and from a posture of distrust, which doesn't breed good like results, you know?
Well, and I remember hitting this point with kids in my life of changing from expectations to expectancy, where I was like, I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know if I'll have kids, if I'll adopt kids, if I'll mentor people and call them my kids, if I'll meet somebody and become a godparent to their kids, if I will like just be surrounded by people. Like I was like, I could have a neighbor that I help babysit their kids. Like I gave up what it had to look like. Yeah. And understanding the promise of God for my life was family. And so it became, instead of it being a specific prophetic,
it's going to look a certain way.
It became very open-handed of this trust of like, the heart need is going to get met. I just don't know how. And so now it feels like an adventure. Like, oh, interesting. I can't wait to see how this unfolds. Instead of this disappointing thing of like, oh, you didn't
come through for me.
Yeah.
It didn't look like how I thought. Yeah. And it's, go ahead.
I want to add this. When you guys are talking, I'm thinking about all the bad words that I got from people that were just total crap and did not land whatsoever and didn't come to pass. And felt like the minute they said it, all my walls went up internally.
Like, no.
And that's just even that I was scared of what they're saying. I'm like, this feels nothing like my life. This does not resonate with me.
Yes.
And
and I
was thinking about how some people, it could feel that like this space of prophetic stuff could feel, again, really scary if you feel powerless to other people.
Yes.
And powerless to like, well, someone said it was God, I have to do it, rather than, oh, prophetic can exist. And also people can be wrong, and I don't have to just go along with what anyone says. And I remember like early on having that bad emotion of like, now I'm trapped inside of this thing they just said. But now I've actually come to a point where if I get words that are just
poppycock,
total poppycock, I've literally, been kind of people like, oh, thank you for your input on that. Appreciate it. And there's been other times where I'm like, I literally have told people, oh, that doesn't resonate with me. That doesn't, well, this is what God's saying.
Okay.
I mean, that's what you feel like he's saying. It doesn't resonate with my life. But that's okay. I thank you for taking the time to want to share with me. Cool, whatever. But we actually can be really powerful in this.
Oh, yeah. Because I have somebody that I worked with who literally, if somebody gave them a prophetic word, they feel trapped. And what happens is we got to use our emotional intelligence. Yeah. We often think of God like our parent. Yeah. And so this client of mine, her dad was very controlling. And so getting a prophetic word literally feels like God's trying to control me the way my dad was. Yeah. He's trying to say, I have to do this. I have to be like this. Yeah. And so often we're reading about God's nature through what we've experienced from humanity.
Yeah. Well, and also as well as like, you have to remember that the person giving the word is coming with their own sense of their relationship with God, how they view God, their theology, and you have to sort through that. So I recently had a client who I was processing some stuff with, and he had gotten a word about like he's single and he wants to get married and wants to have a family, but it just hasn't happened yet. Yeah. And then somebody came and gave him a word saying, God says like, you need to act on this. You just need to do it. Mm-hmm. And he spiraled from the word, because suddenly he felt like, God, I have said I will do, like, I am trying everything that I can. Pressuring. And now I feel so much pressure. And now I feel like a failure. Yeah. That he completely kind of fell off the deep end for a month. And so then he started meeting with me. And the first thing I said is, like, give the word back. Yeah. Because this is not your responsibility. And one thing that you have to remember in prophetic circles is highly prophetic people, or people that you would call a prophet or a prophetess, tend to be very extreme people. Yeah. So when they feel something, they feel it 100%. Totally. And their language will go that way. Yeah. The way that they, say it will go that, it'll be like, this is the Lord. This is what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think it's really important. Number one, I mean, there's some things I think that, prophetic people need to be tempered by pastors. Mm-hmm. And, like people who put in check by people with relational, emotional intelligence. Yep, exactly. Saying, okay, let's bring that down a little bit. But also, when you receive a word from somebody who's being very extreme, number one, it's okay to filter, chew the meat, spit out the bones. Yeah. Take the good stuff, spit out the bad stuff that doesn't resonate. But then also, what's really helpful in that is deciphering a word in the context of community. Mm-hmm. So when I get a word, I call Abby and I say, oh, hey, I got this word, and we start processing through it. And you're like, oh, that seems like really helpful. I wouldn't put too much stock into that. Mm-hmm. We're processing through it together because you're somebody in my trusted space who knows me. Mm-hmm. The walk of God on my life. Mm-hmm. We do life together. So I can trust that when I get a word and I bring it to the people closest to me, that they're going, oh, that's really interesting. Like, I can stand and attest to that word. Or like, let me help you temper that, because it feels like maybe you're feeling pressure from that word.
What we're kind of highlighting here is that, again, words are not a command, but rather an invitation to relationship. It wasn't just with God, but even here we have a situation where, all right, if I'm living in a realm of believing that God wants to communicate with me and connect to me and tell me about my life and walk out a process with me, then inside of that, my safety is inside the relationship of my community. Yeah. Of like, okay, if that's real, let me talk to my community. Now I've gone deeper with my friends. Yeah. Because we have sat and examined a bunch of different angles and processed. Yes. What is this? How is this?
And what's so fun about that is that then when, like, let's say a prophetic word does come to pass, your friends are so excited with you because they're like, oh my gosh, remember when you got that word? That's amazing. Or they'll remember things that I haven't remembered. Yeah. And they're like, remember when God spoke to you? And I was like, oh, I totally forgot about that. Thank you so much. You're right. Like, this is totally the completion of this, I
remember having, I was thinking about this. I had 2 different directional prophetic words from leaders in my life in the last 10 years while I was at Bethel. One time I was quitting my job and they were like, I don't think you're supposed to. Another time I was processing moving to help take care of my mom, and they're like, I don't think you're supposed to. And it was interesting because the first time when I wanted to quit my job and they're like, I don't think you're supposed to, I literally knew, like, no, I know I'm supposed to. Like, and I knew, like, I went home and processed it because I'm gonna process, but I knew, like, no, I mean, literally my body won't work another year. Like, I know. Yeah. Now, there are times where I think people have like a word and they get faith and they're like, no, I am supposed to do this, and then like have grace. So I don't want to The reason the prophetic is so hard is some people will get a word and it will come true for them.
Yes.
In a miraculous way.
Yes.
And some people will get a word and it doesn't have that grace on it.
Yeah.
And so, and there's so much mystery. Why is that? I don't know. I just throw it all in the mystery box. But when I knew, no, my body can't do another year. I have to quit. And I know this is right for me. And I actually feel like the person that gave this word their heart is good, but they're in fear for my future.
Yes.
Then the second time, they gave me a word like, we feel like you're supposed to stay. And I was like, I don't know. I don't feel that from the Lord. I don't know that that's true. And they were like, I have words from God that haven't happened for you here yet. And I was like, I don't know. I don't, but I went home and processed it. And it ultimately didn't change my mind, but it gave me a little more time to, I was like, okay, I mean, I'll think about it.
Yeah.
And then I put it on the shelf.
Yeah.
Like, well, we'll see. And then naturally I got so sick, we couldn't move.
Yes.
And then we went to Spain, and then I've been on this healing journey where we haven't been able to move. And then all of a sudden we got a house here. So it's like, I didn't have to give up my will to follow their word.
Yes.
But there is this humility in my heart where I'm always open to what people have to say without giving them the reins, the power to drive my life towards something or to stop my life. But there is I want to co-partner with God, and we'll just see how it unfolds. Yeah. And I wish a lot of people, if you could let go of, I need to make this happen or not make this happen, the confusion swirl, and like, I'm going to allow myself to see, even like one of the ways we decided where to stay was a very practical reason. Justin was like, I can't be running our entire business while you're sick and move us.
Totally.
I don't have it in me.
Totally.
It's too much for me to take care of you full time, take care of our business full time, and try to move states. And so that's why we didn't move.
Yep, totally.
And I didn't feel like, did we miss it? Did we not miss it? It's this journey of like, we're on the unfolding journey, and that's exactly what we needed.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, if our ultimate long-term goal in life is to learn how to love and learn how to come alive, that can happen anywhere under any circumstance. I could quit this job tomorrow and stop doing the podcast and go, I don't know, go back to doing construction work as my full-time gig and whatever. Yeah. And that is, I'm still going to find my quote unquote destiny, which is coming alive and learning how to love, because that's humanity's destiny. Yeah. Ultimately, not to build some big empire here on earth where your name is known for years to come. Yeah. It's like learning how to love myself and love others and let God love me and love God. Yeah. Like, that whole thing can happen under any conditions or circumstances.
Yeah. That's so good, Justin.
And so it really takes the high stakes off of all of it. And you go, okay, as long as love is involved, as long as learning how to come alive is involved inside of this, then okay, if you tell me tomorrow, if God has an invitation tomorrow to drop everything and move to England, all right. All of America tried to get away from England in the first place. As a red-blooded American, I don't know that I want to go to England, but I will.
Totally. We love all of our English friends. My best friend is
laughing.
English.
Ruth's laughing over there. She's listening to this. But all that to say, it brings a lot of peace when we approach it like that. Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's funny because even as you guys are saying that, a lot in the prophetic Christian community, we talk about faith activating prophetic words, or like if you have faith.
Yes.
And there is an element of that that's true. However, we have to understand that even within the context of faith, you're still safe within love. So what I mean by that is I've gotten words that were really extreme. And even I was like, that word could be right or wrong, but I don't have faith for that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't actually have faith to do what that word is saying. And I felt totally safe within not having faith.
You're like, God, give me faith for it if that's
that became my prayer. God, if you want this, stir faith up inside of me to do something like that.
Give me grace to be able to participate.
But the problem is that what happens is a lot of times people don't have that faith. Then they start beating themselves up. And what's wrong with me? And then what's wrong with, why would you ask this of me, God? Rather than saying, well, if it requires faith, then give me faith. And if I don't have faith, then I'm safe. Then I'm good. You know, and it comes back to something that you told me, Abby, a few weeks ago, actually.
That's so many good things I say.
Yes, you do. But it actually was really helpful for me in processing this exact subject, because I was kind of processing through a situation where I felt like somebody had taken a prophetic word and really run with it. And you said,
in an extreme way.
In a very extreme way. And it was very difficult for me. And I said, it's really hard for me that they aren't taking this word and tempering it. And you were like, yeah, but you have to remember, you have a strong sense of self. They might not have a strong sense of self. And I've been processing that. A lot of times when we like say something or you tell me something, I will chew on it for a year. You know, like I'm that person who's like, it's always kind of in the back of my mind. I'm chewing on it. But it's really impacted me, you saying that, because I thought, man, we really need to talk about, and everything that we're saying kind of comes down to having a strong sense of self, which is what you develop in even like doing something like living fully alive or going on an emotional health journey. You start to begin to understand who you are and understand that who you are, God likes. He likes who you are. He wants to partner with who you are. And when you feel safe within yourself, you feel safe, like, I like this, I don't like this, that's fun for me, I don't like that, you know? And you feel safe with saying like, this is what my boundaries are, this is who I am as a person, then everything you do or come up against goes through that filter. So any prophetic word you receive, you filter it through, okay, well, how does this fit into who I am? I'm not then, which the reverse of that is, if I don't have a strong sense of self, any prophetic word that comes to me, I'm being tossed like the wind in the waves.
Totally.
I'm on a wild goose chase. Oh, I'm over here. And it's so painful because I don't know who I am, and I don't know who I am with God.
Yeah.
Totally.
You know?
It's so true. Actually, what you said is such a great thing. We are about to start our second round of Living Fully Alive. We've never done that before.
It'll officially start May 5th. But right now signups are available.
Yes. And it really will help you gain a sense of self. And like we were talking about in the first prophetic episode, learning how to not abandon yourself. Well, you actually have to learn what not abandoning yourself means, and who you are and how you function and what your emotions are doing and what your thoughts are doing and how your beliefs operate. We go through actually how you work as a human in the Living Fully Alive course. And in the immersion program, you're not only learning about yourself, but you're doing it in the context of community and having people who love you and cheer you on and who fight with you to become more of who you are supposed to be during that process.
And I know for like the three of us, conversations that we've had and a bigger dream on our hearts would be, what would it look like if the church had everything that it has, like the prophetic, everything that's good about the church, but paired with emotionally healthy people? What would that look like? And that's part of a dream of ours is like, what would the church look like emotionally healthy and in all of its splendor and glory and the good stuff about it? And so to me, I'm like, if you are somebody who's in a prophetic community, if this is something that's been, even if you've been hurt by it and you've sworn it off, I would encourage you, start to develop your sense of self, because as you develop your sense of self, do Living Fully Alive. Start to engage that journey, because as you do, I wouldn't be surprised if you look back and go, oh, so much of my pain was actually because I wasn't emotional. I didn't have the maturity to receive it. I wasn't emotionally healthy. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who God, what my relationship was to the Creator in the midst of that, you know?
Absolutely.
There's something that you just said that sparked an idea in me, and I was like, oh, it's interesting. It made me think of this. A lot of times people allow pain to control the outcome of the decisions and the life that they're going to make. So absolutely. I've decided inside of my life, this is just a side bunny trail, but I've decided in my life, like, I won't let pain tell me how I'm going to live or what I'm going to believe.
What my future's going to be.
What's my future is going to be. So a lot of people you talked about will throw out, say they had pain within the prophetic. And they're like, all right, well then I don't want anything to do with prophetic. Wait, you're letting a painful circumstance dictate that you won't participate in something that potentially could bring you so much life and be such a gift to you.
That's good.
And that's one area. There's hundreds of areas within people's lives. Now they've sworn off,
I used to have hope for my life, but hope disappointed me. So now I won't have any hope
whatsoever.
Yeah.
Maybe the way you approached hope and approach your expectations caused you those problems. Why just throw everything out? Your pain is dictating how you're living your life.
What's interesting about that too is that there's whole generations formed off of one person's pain.
Yeah.
In that generation. Like you see a parent who, let's just an example, like if they went through the Great Depression and they are like, I don't trust the banks. We're never going to. And then that next generation is like, oh, well, I feel really skeptical about banks. And then the next, that's just a practical, but this pain works the same way. It's funny because your decision actually within pain can affect generations, you know?
So if you have pain in these areas, my point becomes this, like that's stirring up inside of you. You need to begin to ask, okay, where's my pain at? What is it? How is it determining my life right now? Do I actually want to be a victim to my past pain, or do I want to define my future in a powerful way based on the invitation that exists in front of me? Is there an invitation in listening to this episode that potentially is inviting me to overcome pain and begin to investigate parts of my life that I've let go of in the past?
Well, and I think it's interesting what you're saying, because a lot of times people don't want to go on that journey because they're afraid that if they go on that journey, they'll see where they failed.
Right.
I would say the opposite is true. A lot of times when you go on that journey and you recognize, oh, I got that prophetic word, but I actually took that and ran with it. It's so empowering because you realize you're not a victim to that word. That you made choices in your life that actually made that really painful for you. And whenever I find those things, I'm like, it's hard to hear them. It's hard to see them. It's a lot easier to cling on to being a victim and to blame other people. But once I can embrace that I had a part to play in that, I feel such a sense of relief, because I'm like, oh, liberated. I'm not a victim anymore. I made some choices and I can choose to make different choices in the future.
I can hear people in the back of my head over last episode and this episode. I feel like that people being like, just give me the rules then. Just give me the rules of how this works. Like, I haven't been exposed to this and now I'm being exposed to it. Give me the rules. Or I have been exposed to this stuff before and it didn't work out well. Just give me the rules of how to do it well and how to do it right. And like that 10-point list or whatever of like, no, do it healthy like this. And if you follow these rules, it'll be great. Look, the point is as we're dialoguing about this, we're also creating an invitation for all of you people out there to investigate your heart, investigate a relationship with God, to investigate maybe prophetic words that you've had in the past, investigate how you've approached them. But if you're even approaching it fresh or new or reapproaching this again, there's this opportunity now to be like, I don't know what the rules are. I don't want to formulate a lifestyle based out of pain and fear. I don't want something that's controlling my life, but I want partnership with a friendly, loving Father. And so the first conversation, I think, if there is one for you guys to have out of this episode, is to begin to go, Dad, what does that look like in my life with you? How do you want to meet me with this prophetic conversation? What are the pieces of pain that's maybe happened in my heart where I've shut down that you want to heal in this process? What does it look like to approach this moving forward? If you're an unconditionally loving Father, creating invitations and allowing yourself to be like, I want to investigate this without high stakes, like we talked about before, even in the last episode. Like, what if I did this without high stakes? How do I become childlike in this approach? Like, those are great foundational questions.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good.
I also thought maybe we just pray really quick for people that have pain in this and kind of wrap up.
Yeah, I think that's great.
About that.
I love that.
If you want to sign up for Living Fully Alive, go to justinandabby.com.
That's abi.com.
abi.com. Okay, so I'll just start. God, for anyone's heart out there who's listening, who has felt such disappointment, and they're scared that they can't ever trust you. Like, I actually just saw a picture in my head of people whose dads never came through for them, and getting their hopes up and then crushed again and again feels so vulnerable. And I remember one time God talking to me and being like, it's okay that sometimes people walk away from the prophetic because they have so much pain with disappointment from their childhood that they can't see me around that. like, I just remember
they
feeling,
can't hear me in that context. They can't see me there.
They just have so much pain and I could feel his compassion, like his understanding that it's so hard to figure out how to put our hope and faith in something, and how to hold that in a balanced way and not overly cling to it or be desperate or make it happen or try to figure it out. And so I give you permission, if you've had lots of disappointment, to be able to allow yourself to let that disappointment wash away.
Yeah.
To be able to cry it out, to be able to grieve it out, to be able to feel it, to be able to go through it so that you don't have to feel trapped in a cycle of disappointment. I feel like some of you out there have been really hurt, like you felt really shamed by words that people have given you or a lot of pressure. And we just break that performance, that feeling of you need to do more or be more. I've gotten so many words like that about, oh, if you just do this, you'll be healed. Oh, if you just do this, you'll be healed.
Yeah.
And it becomes self-condemnation and it makes you paranoid. And so we ask God right now that you would begin to break that paranoia off of people, that they have to do things just right, that they have to get things just right, that the weight of the world is on their shoulders, that their breakthrough won't happen until they figure out how to posture themselves perfectly. That's such a lie. It's not all on your shoulders. And if it was, that would be a transaction.
Yep.
That would not be a relationship.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I just speak over you that the Father goes as far to say, it's not your job to carry it. It's mine. Like, you don't have to carry the heavy thing. I get to carry it. You get to play. You get to run. You get to be free. So for anybody who's feeling enslaved or just beaten down under a prophetic word, or is feeling an anxiety because they are swirling and they don't know if they're doing it right or not, we just release that off of you. I just give you permission to give it back to the Father. I give you permission to shelve it. I give you permission to not have to carry that anymore, that you can be free, that you don't have to be enslaved to the prophetic or to what you feel, that you can actually just give it back to the Father. And your job is to play. His job is to carry the heavy things.
Yeah. I keep kind of getting reminded of a people group and seeing kind of a picture of a people group. And it's like, there are people who have said, this is God's word. They've actually used it over and over again to either manipulate, to control.
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that.
Or to have power in a relationship. And it's almost like I see a picture of like a parent. Like a parent's like, this is what God said. This is what God wants. And they actually use the idea of the voice of God inside of the relationship to continually shut your voice down.
Yes.
And I see the pain of those children or the pain of those people who have been in relationships like that, where they're like, I want nothing to do with God or hearing from God or opening up to other people, hearing from God for me, because that feels so painful.
Yeah.
I lost any sense of being able to have a voice in these relationships. Like, there's so much pain from not being able to have a voice inside of these relationships because you were immediately shut down. Your feelings, your boundaries got obliterated because someone said, well, this is what God says.
Yes.
And I just want to say, I'm so sorry for the places you felt manipulated, ran over, disregarded by people utilizing and weaponizing the quote unquote voice of God.
Yes.
I am so sorry. God, will you just begin to touch people's hearts who have had those experiences where it made them really bitter and jaded because of these experiences? Will you help them to grieve the places that they felt controlled, or the places they felt misunderstood, or the places they felt powerless? And God, will you help them develop that sense of self, like Pietze talked about, so that when people have those types of conversations, they would feel such peace in their sense of self that they could disagree and be like, oh, I disagree. And I think that that's crazy what you're saying. And I'm okay with our disagreement that we're now going to have.
Yes. Yeah. I just, as you were saying that, Justin, I just felt, I felt like I could just feel that there were people that they grew up hearing, like, you know, why do I have to do this, Mom? Why do I have to do this, Dad? And they're like, because I said so, because I'm the parent. And there's still that view of God, like, hey, you just do it because I'm God and I said so. And I just feel right now that I just feel that God just actually wants to bring those walls down and create relationship and context, and wants to actually meet you in the place of a relational, loving Father who lets you into the journey and you get to partner with. So for anybody who's hearing that voice in the back of their head constantly when they get a prophetic word or when they hear God, I just release you from that. I just release you from that intention, and I invite you into the relational aspect of God where you get to partner and play, like Justin is saying, with God.
And you have permission to become childlike in this process as you explore friendship with God. You have permission to be childlike and make mistakes and look back and laugh at your mistakes and be like, I definitely made a mess of that.
Yeah.
You have permission to become lighthearted.
Yes.
And joyful and come alive in connecting to a creator who really loves you.
And for people who have never heard God's voice and you'd like to, God, we just ask that you'd begin to speak, that you would interact with your kids where they would feel your presence through warmth, that they would hear a song lyric and feel like you're communicating that to them, that they would have words or dreams or ideas that all of a sudden get sparked in their mind, that you'd begin speaking to them in brand new ways. For people who are listening and are like, I don't even know what it means to hear God's voice. Now I'm scared. For everyone listening, I just ask that God, you'd bring love that pushes out fear.
Yes.
That people would feel like they can be secure in themselves, in their relationship with you, in their boundaries, in connection, that just like Pietze felt so secure with you, she could hear your voice through love. We ask that you'd begin to solidify people's hearts to feel so secure with you that when you speak to them or through other people, that they could hear the words through love.
Yeah.
And God, would you give people hope and faith who've given up hope and faith? And would you give people expectancy. I'm praying for the wrong thing for them. That you'd give people expectancy again. People who've given up because of the past. And we just ask for there to be a wave of your goodness, your hope, your faith, your love that overwhelms everybody listening.
Yes, God.
You know, I just want to end with this story because I just feel like it's simple, but it's one of my favorite stories I had out of my office. And I have a couple like this, but this very specific. I had this one atheist girl who, I never tried to get her to God, but I introduced her to the idea that there's unconditional love that wants to meet you and have a conversation with you. And I started having her just ask questions like, unconditional love, what do you want to tell me about myself today? What do you want to tell me about my future? And I get a phone call from her one day and she says, Justin, some really spooky shit's happening.
Love it.
And I go, oh yeah, what is this spooky shit that's happening? She said, I think there might be a God. I go, oh, why? What's happening? She goes, every time I ask unconditional love, what it thinks or feels about me, or ask to hear things, I start hearing these things like it feels like someone's talking to me inside of myself. Like I don't know how to explain it. I don't have language for it, but something's happening. And again, she wasn't churched with religion. So it was very unfiltered and
raw
and raw and pure. It's the purest. And I started hearing the purest gospel I'd ever heard out of somebody because it wasn't filtered with expectations of what it had to sound like or be like. It was just like, this is just what I heard. And it evolved into her having this entire faith, this beautiful faith, because she was just childlike in her approach and found herself going, oh, there is a God. There is a God, but it wasn't encumbered by a bunch of religious duties and rules and how it had to look. And I just was with her going tell me more, keep investigating. And so I leave you guys with this story because that's a great place to start. Unconditional love. What do what do you want to tell me about myself today? What do you want to tell me about my life? Where are you currently at in my world? And allow that to just in quiet space. She would just sit quietly and just listen and journal when stuff came up. And she would be shocked at the things, these aha moments. And she's like, I never even thought about this before ever in my life. And this came to me. And so it's not something arduous. It's not something impossible. I know that that's something that people sometimes feel, that it's arduous and impossible to connect. And you don't have to overly complicate it. And when God begins to speak to you, it may be through pictures, it may be through words, it may be through allegories. I don't know, but it's going to be in a way that causes you to feel connected to, like, there's a really good dad who knows you and wants to be involved in your life.
Yeah.
That's so good.
All right. Well, if you got something out of this, or you want someone else to get something out of this, you better rate, review, subscribe, and share. Go to iTunes. When you write a written review and you put some 5 stars down on that, it tells people like, oh, what is this random podcast? It has a lot of stars. I want to check that out and start spreading the message.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so do it. Just do it.
Do it.
All right, guys. Hey, Pietze, it was great having you here.
Thanks, guys.
I'm sure we're going to have more.
So happy to be here.
More Pietze episodes.
Always.
Abby's going to take some time probably and talk to her one-on-one on one of these podcasts without me.
Kick you out.
Kick you out. Kick the
Gladly.
bean bag out.
The bean bag.
The bag of beans.
The bag of beans. All right, guys. Go away.
Bye.
Bye.